One of the most common questions that I've been asked is about the issue of insurance. So I'm going to answer all of these questions inshallah today. And because the topic is so long and detailed, it will be our only question for today. So the topic for today is, what is the position of our scholars with regards to overall the topic of insurance, whether it is commercial insurance, house insurance, car insurance, life insurance? What is the opinion of scholars about insurance? This will be our topic for today. So we answer this question by beginning with the definition. What exactly is insurance? Insurance, of course, as we all know, it is a form of risk management where lots of people come together. These are the policy holders, and they pay a company, the insurance company, a known fee to protect them against an unknown event or an uncertain future event. And of course, the concept of insurance was not around in the time of, the Prophet ﷺ of the Sahaba. When the Quran was revealed, the people were not doing these types of transactions. In fact, insurance is a relatively modern phenomenon. And it only began in the 17th century, after the Great Fire of London in 1666. If you're aware of your history, London was engulfed in flames, and I think a quarter of the city or half the city was destroyed. Tens of thousands of houses were destroyed. And so the concept came of the people who lost their properties, that what if we were somehow protect the value of our property and have a fee that we can pay to a company that we can gain back the protection of our house. And this began the concept, if you like, of house insurance. And in fact, our own founding father, Benjamin Franklin, when he came to America, he actually founded the Philadelphia Contribution for the Insurance of Houses from the Loss of Fire. That's the name of the company. So if your house is burnt in a fire, Benjamin Franklin has a business. If you pay him money, then he will do that. The first, therefore, was house insurance. Within a few decades, England, of course, at this time is a naval superpower. Rich merchants are sending their ships overseas, and they don't know what's going to happen to my merchandise. Will a pirate attack it? Will some type of issue take place, and all of my money will be lost? And so these merchants came together, and they over literally coffee discussions at a coffee house in London, the issue or the notion came about, what if we were to pay a fee so that in case something happens, right, we will then get our money back from that merchandise. Hence, in 1774, Lloyd's of London, the famous company Lloyd's, which is still one of the largest insurance companies in the world, Lloyd's of London began offering what we now call business, insurance or merchandise insurance. And around the same time as well, the concept of life insurance also came about. Even though, obviously, to be technical, all of these prototypes are very different from modern equivalents, but still the notion is coming. House insurance, property insurance, life insurance is all coming in the same time frame. Interestingly enough, it was only after great crises took place in the Western world where the concept of insurance became common. So for example, it was after the American Civil War, when so many people died, that men who were still alive said, we should have a life insurance on ourselves in case we die. And the largest spike in life insurance happened after World War I, believe it or not. When so many hundreds of thousands of people died, so those that were left alive were like, hey, we might as well get insurance over here. So it's interesting how calamities had an impact on insurance. Now, before I even get to the fiqh issue, obviously the question a lot of us have, how can these insurance companies make a profit anyway? I mean, if you think about it, you're paying, $100, $200, whatever per month, and then when you need them, they're going to pay you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Or life insurance, you're paying, 50, 60 for those of you that, might possibly have it. We'll get to its verdict soon. And the goal is to get $500,000, right? So how are they going to make a profit when you are paying a nominal fee? And the response to this is by pooling together a large amount of people's money and then aggressively investing that money in bonds or in other profitable enterprises, and also sometimes giving banks that money so that they can give at an interest, so then the insurance companies get at an interest. And by calculating, for example, if all of this crowd were to give to the company, right, how many will actually need at any given time? Not all of them, small percentage. So the insurance company essentially takes a large amount of pool of cash from lots of people and aggressively makes a guaranteed profit on that in giving bonds and interest and whatnot. And then it has its complex calculations that what percentage is going to ask the money is going to be a minimal percent or a lesser percent, and so overall they will make a profit. And the fact of the matter is, insurance companies regularly make large profits. Generally speaking, in the modern world, insurance companies are a profitable business, and they make profits, regularly. And therefore, one can say simplistically that insurance companies make a profit from two sources. Number one, the premiums collected from lots of people, which they calculate will be more than the amounts they pay back to some people, right? And then number two, they take all of this wealth and they aggressively put it in stocks or bonds a lot of times, because they need guaranteed. They cannot usually invest it in areas that there might be a loss in. So they aggressively invest in guaranteed profit, and so this will also give them back their profit. Now, obviously, the goal of every insurance company is to make a profit. And that is not problematic per se. Every company, its goal is to make profit. And the insurance companies have an army of statisticians, of mathematics experts, of sociologists who calculate complex equations of trends of human society, like what percentage will actually need health insurance. Based upon that, they will calculate their premiums. So there's nothing wrong with the goal of making a profit. Every company wants to make a profit. However, the issue that comes is that insurance companies are different from other businesses in that there's no tangible item being sold. There's no actual service that they are giving. So they are a different type of business than the one that most people are accustomed to dealing with. When you go buy a car, you're purchasing something. You buy food, you're purchasing something. Or you buy a service, right? Even you can buy a service, no problem. You're buying something that is tangible. Somebody comes or you buy a software, somebody comes and cleans your house. You're buying something that is tangible. You can measure it. The problem comes, of course, insurance is not something that is tangible. Rather, it is paying money to guarantee the return of money in an unlikely event of an accident or misfortune, or if it's life insurance, in the likely and inevitable event of death, whenever it happens, which you want to still delay as much as possible. And the insurance company also wants you to delay, because they don't want you to die immediately. They want you to live a long life to get your premiums as well. So this is a brief history of insurance and what insurance is. And therefore, obviously, insurance is a modern issue. You're not going to find statements of the classical scholars. Ibn Taymiyyah did not write about insurance. It didn't exist in his time. However, interestingly enough, by the way, one of the greatest scholars of the Maliki madhab by the name of Al-Ashhab, who wrote Al-Mudawwana, and he is one of the main founders of the Maliki madhab after Imam Malik. In his famous book, he died 204 Hijrah, so a very early scholar. He's giving examples of false transactions. And a modern researcher has come across a paragraph in his book in which essentially he describes interest. It's a theoretical. He goes, what if this, what if that? And he says, for example, and this is from his book, Al-Mudawwana, that it is not allowed for a person, as you well know, to say to another, I will give you this much money to protect my merchandise to such and such a time. Because, I'm going to use technical terms, just memorize them, we're going to come back to them. Because there is gharar and qimar. These are technical terms, I'm going to come back to it. Because there is gharar and qimar in these contracts. Because the one who paid the money, the one who was paid the money, if he knew that the merchandise would perish, if he knew the merchandise would be destroyed, he would not be content with a small amount of money. In fact, he wouldn't be even willing double or triple this amount. And the one who's paying the money, if he knew that his merchandise would be safe, he wouldn't pay anything. Right? So he is saying that there is an amount of gharar and qimar, and he goes, it's well known this contract cannot be valid. Now this is actually very accurately, hypothetically describing interest, and Al-Ashhab is of the era of the great Imams. He's even before Imam al-Bukhari, he's 206 Hijrah. Now, even though this is a theoretical one, this overall attitude of our modern scholars has been to problematize and generally prohibit the concept of interest as it currently exists. Now, there is a concept called takaful al-ijtima'i. There's a concept called takaful al-ijtima'i, which is a mutually, pooled resources of interest which some scholars have said is an alternative. In today's lecture, I will not even talk about it for one simple reason. It doesn't exist right now. It is a hypothetical alternative. And our scholars say people should do this. And the example is if 100 people came together, all of them are paying to a big pot. And if somebody needs the money from that pot, then he will get the money that is in that pot, then he will, continue to give back until somebody else gives. So they say this is a type of mutual, interest, takaful ijtima'i, and it's hypothetical. It doesn't actually exist in the Western world for sure. Some countries like Malaysia and others are attempting to do something of this nature, where they have an alternative to insurance, but it doesn't exist in the Western world at all. So I'm talking about practical interest or insurance that exists over here. So the overall philosophy of pretty much most of the scholars of Islam from the time of the 1700s when interest came out up until our times is that conceptually speaking, the contract of interest is not a valid contract in accordance with the principles of Islamic law. And they gave 4 primary reasons why this is the case. They have more than 4. For our lecture, we'll do number 4. Number 1, gharar. We already came across the word gharar, right? Number 1, gharar. And we're going to come to this. Number 2, they said there is an element of interest that is clear. Number 3, qimar, which is gambling. Okay? Number 3, gambling. And number 4, they said, some of them said, that having insurance goes against tawakkul and belief in qadar. And they have other issues as well. In my brief talk today, we'll mention only these 4. Now, in my humble opinion, the first 2 are the clear-cut issues that make interest from an Islamic paradigm something that is very problematic. And that is gharar and interest. The issue of qimar or gambling, it is valid but not as strong as the first 2. And the 4th issue, that it goes against iman in qadar, in my humble opinion, it should not be on this list at all. Because, why is this the case? Iman in qadar is one thing, and using reasonable precautions is another thing. If insurance were halal, then it would be something we should do to protect ourselves from a misfortune or calamity, just like we install fire detectors, just like we wear armor if we're going into battle, just like our Prophet ﷺ said, tie your camel and then put your trust in Allah. So the issue of bringing in iman bil qadar when it comes to interest is not a valid way to refute the concept of interest. Because anything that is halal can be used to protect yourself against a misfortune, and in fact that is a part of qadar. It is a part of qadar to use our natural resources to protect ourselves against a calamity, right? Therefore, this whole issue of saying that interest goes against iman in qadar, in my humble opinion, it is an incorrect point to bring in. It should not be brought in the first place when it comes to issue of insurance. It should only be the first 3. And that is number 1, gharar, which is the biggest. Number 2, interest. And number 3, gambling. Jayyid. Now we get to what is gharar? What is gharar? And gharar is such an important concept that I'm going to spend a few minutes on it, because as Imam al-Nawawi said, that the concept of gharar and the prohibition of gharar is one of the foundational premises of Islamic economics. It's one of the big chapters of Islamic economics, the prohibition of gharar. What is gharar, and where do we get its prohibition from? Hadith in Sahih Muslim, Abu Hurairah narrated that the Prophet ﷺ forbade bay'ul hasa wa bay'ul gharar, the transactions of stones and the transactions of gharar. What is a transaction of stones? Bay'ul hasa. Bay'ul hasa was a transaction in Jahiliyyah in which a person would have merchandise all in front of him, right? The seller would have all of his merchandise, and he would go to the purchaser, and the purchaser would say, here's basically 100 dinars, and I will purchase anything my rock falls on. I'm going to throw the rock, and whatever pile it falls on, right, it will be my pile. Now obviously the piles are not going to be the same. One will be wheat, one will be grain, one will be butter, whatever, and the person's throwing and trying to get something over there. So this is obviously a type of unknown or uncertainty. Another version of Bay'ul Hasa is that I will purchase your land as far as my rock can go. So as far as my rock can go, that's how much I will purchase your land. But you see, the strong thrower will throw much more, and the weak thrower will throw much less. And so this is an uncertainty. And therefore, to clarify what is the bay' of the transaction of the stone, the Prophet ﷺ also said, وَبَيْعُ الْغَرَرِ. And gharar means uncertainty. Gharar means unknown. Any transaction in which you do not know what you are getting, it is an unknown what you are getting, this transaction is forbidden by the unanimous consensus of all the madhahib and scholars of Islam. You cannot purchase an unknown. The contract has to be known. What are you buying? For how much money? When is the payment going to occur? It must be everything clear cut. If there is an element of extreme uncertainty, then the contract becomes null and void. For example, if somebody says, in this box there is something, but I'm not going to tell you what it is, and I'll sell it to you for $100. This contract is null and void, batil, according to all of the scholars of Islam. You cannot purchase an unknown. Or if a person, again, pulls out a lottery type of stuff. This is the standard lottery. If you purchase a ticket of, $10, one of the people will get it. That's the Bay'ul Hasa. It's basically you're throwing the lottery. One of the people will get it and the others will not get it. Now, by the way, footnote here. What is forbidden is the essence of the contract being unknown. As for small details being unknown, this is obviously understood. When you purchase a car, you know the overall state of the car. You know the model, the state is good. Now obviously, if somebody finds a small scratch underneath the seat or something, he cannot say, oh, I didn't know about this. This is a gharar that is yasir. They call it negligible amount of gharar. Okay? You purchase a house, you see the overall quality of the house, right? Now if there is, one socket of the electric socket broken, you're not going to say, oh, you have mischaracterized the house. It's a small amount, right? So this is something that is called al-gharar al-yasir, a negligible amount of uncertainty, right? A small amount of uncertainty is overlooked. Now, by the way, I've given two examples that are very clear-cut. You understand in the middle there are gray areas, right? And this is not to talk to get into it, but just to whet your appetite. One of the controversies of modern times, in which famous scholars are on both sides, is all-you-can-eat buffets. All-you-can-eat buffets. So, don't go there. Imam Sahib does not want me to go there. Meaning you don't want me to go to the buffets, or you don't want me to go to the example of who goes to the buffets. If there is an all-you-can-eat buffet of halwa puri, and a group of imams, mashallah, goes, versus a group of people on the keto carb diet goes, they're going to pay the same amount, right? But, mashallah, imams have barakah when it comes to halwa puri. And the keto guys will eat nothing. And this is, jokes aside, is this gharar that is extreme, or is this gharar that is qalil or yasir? Most of the ulama of our time say that this is overlooked gharar, because the restaurant owners have calculated and figured out an average amount, and on average a person eats a certain amount and whatnot. But some of my teachers were stricter and they said, no, this is not gharar yasir, because it is known that a person might eat 4 or 5 times the amount of another person. And so he would say it is not allowed to go to, one of my famous teachers, he would say it's not allowed to go to this because this is gharar. So my point is, I give you 2 examples that are clear cut. Uncertainty, what is inside the box? And it's a closed and shut and padlock. I'm not going to tell you what's inside the box. And by the way, this is done in America when the storages, right? When the storages are locked up, right? And then the contract expires. So the person says, unknown, I don't know what it is, I'll sell it to you, whatever is inside for $100. This is gharar. It is not allowed for any Muslim to get involved in this, because this is exactly bay'ul hasa. You throw a stone at random, you don't know what's going to happen. This is exactly bay'ul hasa. It's not allowed. This is gharar that is fahish, or that is a lot. And gharar yasir, I gave the example. Anything you buy, you do not examine it to the molecular level. You do not examine, you have an idea. You buy a pound of grapes. You do not examine every single grape. You understand overall the quality is whatever, XYZ quality, and you purchase accordingly. Obviously, in the middle, there are middle examples which we're going to neglect for our talk today. Now, in the insurance transaction, what are you getting back for what you pay? Do you know? This is why the entire transaction really is a type of extreme gharar. And this is well known. And that's why the vast majority of scholars, like 99% of the Ummah scholars, when they talk about insurance, they say the number one issue insurance technically cannot be allowed is gharar. You are paying the premiums every single month, and it is possible for 15, 20, 30 years, you never need anything. And it is possible the next month something happens and the insurance company pays you $500,000, $1 million, right? And this, if this isn't gharar, what is gharar? So the Sharia does not allow gharar, and insurance is an example of clear-cut gharar. And I gave you 2 examples of this, that you can pay for many, many years and you get nothing. And even the second month, once you insure, may Allah protect all of us, if somebody insures their house, the next month something happens, the insurance company is going to pay, and the guy only paid $50 or $100, and the insurance company has to pay whatever, $500,000, what it might be. So this is the number one reason, and this is, in my humble opinion, very clear. There's no going around this. Number 2, they said, what is number 2? Why insurance is not allowed? Number 2, they said, interest. And the issue of riba being inherent in insurance is something that is also self-evident. The issue of interest being a part of insurance is self-evident. Why? Because, all of you should know this, when it comes to buying and selling currencies and money, the Sharia has a whole different set of laws than when it comes to buying and selling merchandise and goods. Okay? When it comes to exchanging money, if it is the same currency, it must be the same amount and spot trade on the time. If I give you $10, you're allowed to give me, if I give you a $10 bill, you're allowed to give me single $1, no problem. Right? And it generally must be done on the spot, or if it is deferred, we know it will be exact. I can give you $10 today, say, oh, I have the change at home, and it'll be 1111, I'm going to give you. You cannot charge me $11 or $9 for giving you a $10 bill, right? So generally speaking, 2 conditions must be met if it's the same currency, and that is spot trade. Spot trade doesn't mean I collect the 10 right then and there. It means we know you will give me 10 in single and the same amount. If it is a different currency, then the only condition is you know the amount, spot trade, but it doesn't have to be the same amount. So I have British pounds, you're not going to give me 50 pounds for $50. You will give a different amount, but when I hand you, when the transaction happens, I know how much I'm going to get back, right? So this is spot trade. Now, when it comes to insurance, is it the same currency or different currency? Actually, it doesn't really matter, because the point is, it is the same, but it doesn't really matter. Because when I give you the money, what am I going to get back? Money. Do I know how much money? No. And this is the essence of interest. This is the essence of interest. Exchanging money at different rates, or unknown rates of a different currency. This is the essence of interest. I cannot give you 50, 50, 50, 50. Then something happens. Oh, give me $1 million. Give me $500,000. I am purchasing money for money, right? And this is the second reason why our scholars say that insurance, conceptually speaking, goes against the laws of the Sharia. And technically, for those who are advanced students, both types of riba are common in an insurance clause, because there's riba al-fadl and riba al-nasi'a. Riba al-fadl means that the quantities of the same currency have to be the same. Riba al-nasi'a means spot, means at the same time. In an insurance contract, neither condition is met. There's 2 types of riba, by the way, in Islam. Riba al-fadl and riba al-nasi'a. Maybe in a later time we'll have this more advanced class. But for those that know their fiqh, understand that insurance is guilty of both types of riba. Riba of different amount and riba of time. Because you're not getting it at the same time. Okay, so there's riba al-fadl and riba an-nasi'a. So, as I said, there's 4 primary reasons. The 4th one we'll neglect. The first 2 we have done, and that is there is gharar and there is riba. The 3rd one, qimar, gambling. And I say there's an element to this. At the same time, if this were the only issue, it's not the strongest, and so an argument can be made against, because you can make an argument that investing in stocks is a type of gambling, meaning you don't know the result. And in and of itself, generally speaking, stocks are halal. I haven't answered that question. Maybe one later time we will answer this question. What makes a stock halal to invest in? But my humble opinion, and Allah knows best, the issue of qimar or gambling is not the strongest point to negate the validity of insurance. It is one point we can add to the list, but the first 2 are open shut, as they say. And that is gharar and riba. And this is something that even the most basic student who begins to study Islamic economics can understand. Now, the issue of gambling, as I said, you understand it. You put a small amount and your goal is to get a large amount back, right? So you just like when you buy a $10 lottery ticket and your goal is you win the lottery. And so they say this is qimar. And I say, okay, I see where you're coming from, but don't we all do the same for stocks? I mean, don't we all wish we had invested in Yahoo back in 1999? For those of you that know what I'm talking about, right? If we only had $10,000 back then we wouldn't have to be employed and khalas. So that's also a type of, but so that's not haram. So therefore I say with my utmost respect, qimar is not the main issue that we can use single-handedly. By the way, these 4 are the main, then there's 5, 6, 7 that other people do, and in my humble opinion, the first 2 are enough to be said. Now, the fatwa that, conceptually speaking, insurance is haram, is the standard fatwa given by the vast majority of scholars, and the first alim to ever, that we know of, to ever issue a fatwa about interest was one of the greatest ulama of the Hanafi madhab, Ibn Abidin al-Hanafi, who died in 1784 and who wrote the famous book, Radd al-Mukhtar, which is a very famous standard Hanafi textbook, and he died 1784. So it's very interesting, subhanAllah, while insurance is just coming out in England, and Ibn Abidin was where? You should know where he lived. Where did he live? Damascus. And he's in Damascus, and he, subhanAllah, I don't know how, actually, really would be interested to find out how did he know about what is insurance or what not, but he wrote a detailed fatwa that went over the contract of insurance, and he laid the skeletal foundations for all of these later ulama in 1784, subhanAllah, that he wrote this, and pretty much after him, it simply became the standard, and everybody is looking at it, even if insurance is evolving, but the same issue of qimar, of gharar and of riba exist. And that is why I do not know of any council of fiqh scholars in the globe, and there are over a dozen of such councils. I do not know of any such council that has said the concept of interest is halal. And I can quote you the Council of Senior Scholars of Saudi Arabia, the Kuwaiti Council of Scholars, the Azhar Council of Scholars, you have the Rabita, the Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami in the Rabita, you have the Council of Scholars of Islamic Finance, Al-Mu'tamar Al-Alimi Lil-Iqtisad Al-Islami. There is a large scholarly body of financial experts, the largest such one in the world. And they have semi-regular meetings and they issue fatwas. These are the most knowledgeable specialists in Islamic finance in the world. And they come together once in a while and they issue fatwas. And essentially all of these councils that are well known and famous have said the concept of insurance, conceptually, it is not allowed, as it exists today. Again, remember there's an alternative which doesn't exist in the modern world, and they say this is maybe halal, but that doesn't exist in the modern world. Now, did anybody disagree? Yes, as usual. It's not ijma' 100%. We have a handful of names that in the realm of modern Islamic law are known to be, how should we put this? To have views that are atypical. Their knowledge is respected, their reputation is established, everybody admires them, but they're known to be atypical in their fatwas. And some of these people have been at the forefront, in fact, they're the only ones that have been allowing insurance as a concept. And perhaps the most famous amongst them is Dr. Mustafa Az-Zarqa and also Dr. Abdul Wahab Khalaf. These are two global ulama who were world famous in the 70s, 80s, 90s. They both passed away in the 90s, or early 90s, I think, yeah. But these were like, they were on the same panels as Shaykh Qardawi and others, those to that level. And everybody admired and respected them. They have established their reputation. And they have fatwa that are known to be outside of what is called, the norm. And that doesn't make it wrong, by the way. If you listen to my last lectures, it doesn't make it wrong. I'm just saying these are people that are typically outside the box. And Dr. Mustafa Zarqa was one of the first to write a treatise about insurance being permissible. And this became like the standard for later scholars who wanted to make it permissible. And he argues that there is no gharar. We said number one is gharar. He argues that there is no gharar. Why? He says because the companies are doing their due diligence and making sure that the risk is overall assessed and minimized. And they said, as for this claim that there is no tangible benefit, no, there is tangible benefit. There is recognizable benefit. You get something tangible from insurance. What do you get from insurance, guys? Very good, mashallah, hit the nail on the head. You get peace of mind. This was Mustafa Zarqa's point. When you have insurance, you get peace of mind. That is something tangible. It's something that is, you can know it. I mean, tangible means you know it's there. It's something that is there. And he gave the example of a security guard. Security guard, we have our security guard here, right? We have, or maybe if there's a caravan, you hire a security convoy for the caravan. When the banks have, I don't know if they still have it or is there something in the movies. Do they still deliver money to the banks? I don't know. But if they deliver money to the banks, those armored cars always have security. Okay, you're paying the security guard an amount of money. Do you know how much work he will need to do? Is there going to be a robbery that he has to protect from or not? Do you know that? No. If there's no robbery, if nothing happens, that's what we hope for. Alhamdulillah, our security guard just walks and enjoys and mashallah says salam to all of us, right? May Allah protect all of us and all of the Muslims. But if something were to happen, right, what responsibility will be on the security guard is much more than for the rest of the year. And he's not going to get an extra pay raise for that, is it? It's an unknown. And Dr. Mustafa Zarqa said this is the same as what? Insurance. Right? And he has other, issues as well. Now, other scholars said that, well, no, the gharar is in the individual transaction, one-on-one. You're looking at the company and you're saying there's no gharar, but individually, one-on-one, there is. And then, other points as well that they responded to this. Now, therefore, that having been said, before I move on to the next half, that was half of my response. So we have summarized now what is insurance, the history of insurance, the fact that Muslim ulama, generally speaking, have prohibited it and the reasons of their prohibition. And the fact of the matter is, statistically speaking, you can count the people who have said insurance as a concept is halal on the fingers of one hand. The big names that have said insurance is halal, you can count them on the fingers of one hand. Everybody else in the ummah from all the different, groups of fiqh of Islam and even the mainstream theological groups within Sunni Islam, they've all looked at this and they've said that the concept of insurance goes against the Sharia. That having been said, we now move on to the more pertinent issue. See, here is where many good Muslims, may Allah increase them in their goodness and their iman, they fall into an error. And they don't understand that the Sharia, yes, abstract-wise, something might be forbidden or haram, but at times the application in a particular context becomes permissible because of the context. This is something that every alim worth his salt knows. This is something well known. Fiqh is not something that is purely abstract and theoretical. And the average loving, caring, zealous Muslim doesn't understand this. And the average Muslim wants to know the abstract and then thinks, khalas, that is it. And when somebody comes along and says, well, yes, that is the abstract, but in this situation, perhaps it is permissible. Sometimes our Muslim feels, oh, this scholar has betrayed the Sharia. He doesn't know anything because I know that to be haram. Ironically, pretty much everyone says insurance is haram. And pretty much everyone says, in some cases, it becomes permissible because of the context. Do you understand? And there is no tanaqud, there's no contradiction. There's no contradiction. Because this is what fiqh really is. This is the reality of fiqh. To take the theoretical abstract is easy. Even the beginning student, an undergraduate in Sharia can do. But to then apply, this is the difference between a medical student and a doctor of 30 years. Right? The medical student reads the textbook and doesn't understand, hey, the case in front of me has a slight change. The textbook says it, I must do it. Whereas the doctor of 30 years knows, hold on a sec, that's the general rule. But the case in front of me, because of my experience, because of this and that, it is an exceptional scenario, right? And this is where a lot of times we find the tension happening between the neophytes and the younger students of knowledge versus those that are well respected. And that's why the same councils that said insurance is haram, without exception, in every fatwa, they then come back and they say, however, in such and such circumstances, it might be permissible for those people. You see the point here, right? And so we now get back to applying this theoretical, to applying the abstract to what? To the reality, to the real situation. And this is where we say that pretty much all the fiqh councils that look at the situation of Muslims in minority lands, they all give concessions in some scenarios for those minority Muslims. You see, there is no contradiction here at all. And that's what I need to impress upon you. And there are specific fiqh councils that are based in the West. And there are fiqh councils in the East that are aware of what is happening in the West. And that is why when you look at their fatwa, which I have looked at, all of them say, theoretically, conceptually, insurance is not allowed. However, in certain circumstances, it becomes permissible because of the overriding need, because of the necessity, because of the hardships that would be faced otherwise. And so, for example, AMJA, which is the American Muslim Jurists Association, which is based here in America, or the European Council for Fatwa, which, I love AMJA and I love our fiqh council that I'm a part of, but the fiqh council of Europe, frankly speaking, its scholars are of a more global nature and more well-known, right? Jokes aside, I sit on the Fiqh Council of North America. Sheikh Qadhi used to sit on the Fiqh Council of Europe. There's a world of a difference, okay? There is no comparison. With my utmost respect to all of us here, the Fiqh Council of Europe is the senior most council, in my humble opinion, that deals with Western affairs. Because the caliber of people who sit on it are at a totally different global level. That's because there are more Muslims in Europe, by the way. And that's because they've been in Europe longer. We are still new in America, and things are different for us. Our quantity is less. We've only been here in large numbers since the 80s, whereas in Europe, they've been since post-World War II. So things are different. The concentration is higher. So we are giving excuses for ourselves. But I am telling you, as somebody who sits on the Fiqh Council of North America, I personally respect the European Council immensely because of the caliber of people on it. And actually I was in England 2 days ago and I met with the president of the council to discuss certain issues of fiqh as well. So the point being, the European Council of Fatwa and Research has given a detailed fatwa about insurance, and they concluded conceptually insurance is not allowed. And then in its ruling, which if you want to look up, and I encourage you to do your own research, ruling number 25/7-6, it ruled that according to the vast majority of scholars of Islam, insurance is not in accordance with the principles of Islamic law, but in light of the goals of the Sharia and the situation of Muslims in Europe, then there are situations where it would be permissible to take insurance. And the fatwa mentions 3 things in particular as examples, not as a comprehensive list. As examples where the European Council, which at the time had Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi as its head, and a galaxy of ulama, if you know their names, Faisal Molwi and Abdullah al-Judai and al-Karaghadai, and so many of the great ulama that are, some of them are still alive, some of them have passed away, because this fatwa was given around 17, 18 years ago. So it's relatively recent, but still, 2 decades ago. They said in 3 circumstances, definitely it should be allowed. Number 1, they said, insuring property insurance for the masajid and Islamic schools, because the loss is too great to replicate. Having insurance against these structures that are the bastions of Islam. May Allah protect all of our masajid. What would we do if some crazy guy comes and does something? How are we going to, the loss that would happen, it is simply too much realistically for a community to cope with. Given that darura, then the European Council said to take insurance to protect these structures is something that is permissible. Number two, they said, insuring one's private properties or cars or businesses from natural disasters like fires or earthquakes. Number three, they said health insurance where the cost is prohibitive to take reasonable health measures. I think this was a dig in America actually, because Europe, mashallah, has all social health care, as you know. That's the joke. But anyway, the fatwa is clear. Where health insurance is prohibitively expensive, which is essentially America, number one on the list, then health insurance becomes a need and a necessity, and it becomes permissible to take. And they concluded and they said, as for life insurance, the committee has paused discussion because of its controversy, and they will look at it in a later fatwa, which they did, and I'm going to come back to. Okay? And in another fatwa, the Al-Majlis, the same European Council, fatwa number 30/2-8, they said that, so they discussed life insurance. In that fatwa, they said that life insurance was not allowed, and this is the position of the vast majority of the councils, and they did not make an exception for Western lands. So, the European Council convened 17, 18 years ago, discussed insurance and allowed specific insurance for Western people. And they said, life insurance, problematic, let's discuss it in a few years. They did discuss it a few years later. And they issued a fatwa that life insurance doesn't meet the criterion for hardship, for darura. And so they did not allow it, but they made an exception, and they said, only if the company offers it without you signing on. So it's something that you're not paying for, or you're not opting into it, or you're not, it's not something that you are, directly getting separately. It's coming from the company. In this case, you are not getting it as a third-party entity. Or they said, if there is a type of insurance policy that the government does, which is totally separate. When the government gets involved, right, then it's really not the insurance that we understand. It's a type of taxation. So they gave an exception, Social Security, whatever, that doesn't come under this as all. So, therefore, to conclude this issue, and then I have one issue left and we're done. To conclude this issue, it is very clear, and Allah knows best, that theoretically speaking, the concept of insurance has major problems, and it goes against a number of fundamental tenets of the goals of Islamic finance. Nonetheless, in circumstances where life becomes unreasonably difficult, where it is not possible to live a regular life, or where the government forces you to get insurance. And Amjad also has a fatwa about car insurance and health insurance in America. And Amjad is based here in America. And the Fiqh Council as well, that I'm a part, has a fatwa. All of these councils have said that car insurance is something that is mandatory. And you cannot live in this land without a car. So you are allowed to get it, but Amjad says you should get the minimal amount possible. This is Amjad's fatwa. And health insurance is prohibitively expensive health in this country, and so it is not possible for an average person to live in this land, without having health insurance. And so they said it is something that is permissible to get. And the fatwa also says, by the way, which I found interesting, Amjad's fatwa also said that the Muslim should also push for social reform to get, they didn't say Obamacare, but essentially get it something that is halal. Because once the government takes charge, then it's clearly halal, right? When the government is allowed to give you anything it wants from your taxes, right? So building roads, schools are free, and if the health is free, then there's no issue. And frankly speaking, from an Islamic standpoint, it's much better as well. So if you want to become of that party simply because of this issue, then we have Amjad's fatwa that's semi-just anyway. Don't quote me on that. Okay, final issue that is related to this insurance. Obviously, the question comes about working in insurance companies. Working in insurance companies. And the European Council and Amjad have looked into this issue, and they've come to very similar conclusions. Essentially, it is the same conclusion. And the European Council in 2008, 10 years ago, released a fatwa that said the base ruling or the default is that it is not allowed to work in commercial insurance companies. However, exceptional circumstances can be granted, and they gave some examples, primarily if a person is not able to find a job. So rather than remain homeless or without a job, this is a darura, but they said, and Amjad said the same thing, if a person is not able to find a job, and that's the only job they have, they cannot accept it as status quo. And they have to actively work to find employment in another field, and not like this employment, not be happy with it, and know that this is a temporary situation until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finds a way out for them. Until they find an alternative source, they're allowed to work in this environment. And that is because, again, we are talking about something that the entire industry is haram. If the entire industry is haram, Muslims cannot be employed by that industry. We cannot be employed by Budweiser, can we? We cannot be employed. Doesn't matter if you're an accountant for Budweiser. We cannot be employed by, generally speaking, directly by a bank, because we don't believe in that enterprise of banking. Similarly, insurance, the entire enterprise is based upon this. So the fatwa from these councils is that should be avoided. Now, last point here, and then I'm done. And I know there's a gazillion questions because each one has specific scenarios. Inshallah, we'll try to answer them as I walk up, but I can't open the floor now, or else we will never finish tonight. The last question that I'm done, point that I'm done. There is an exception, though, for working for insurance or banks. And that is, if you are working for a third-party company, and you are a consultant, and your third-party company assigns you to these industries for a period of time, and you're not able to get out of it. Sometimes you're able to choose your job, then you should choose it. If you're not able to get out of it, in this case, your employer is halal, and your job and expertise is halal. Your employer has contracted you to something that theoretically is haram, and it's not good. But the fatwa has come that, okay, in this case, you can't really pick and choose every single thing. So because your employer and you is a halal contract, if they put you to an insurance company for 6 months or whatnot, if you can avoid it, fine. If not, then you are forgiven, because your employer is not the insurance agency, it is the third party. And with that, inshallah, we come to the conclusion of today's fatwa, and we'll come back, inshallah ta'ala, for our next session. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.